I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside. It's so comfortable, and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off-road. The guy managed the group. He was like, what are you doing in this beautiful car? I'm like, I'm going off-road. He's like, are you sure? Because you can use one of ours. And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, no, we're going to do this. And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability, as well as its robust interior, are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
These days, we're all investors, trying to be smart with our money despite our worst impulses. But at iShares, we believe that deep down inside of every investor is a better investor. One that's just waiting to be let out. Explore iShares ETFs and insights and let your best investor out. Visit iShares.com for more information.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show on the Choose Yourself Network. Today on the James Altucher Show.
Have you ever had great mentorship? Is there somebody or some resource that's been a really great source of wisdom and guidance for you?
Yeah, in every area of life, even in chess, learning chess, the first thing I would do is I would find an instructor and I would take lessons. I would learn from the best in every field that I was ever interested in. That's who's the best and how can I learn from them. That's the first thing I do.
So you're turning 50 next year?
Yeah, next year in January, I'm turning 50. I don't feel 50.
What do you feel? You feel like 35, 25?
I remember when I was 24, I played basketball with some friends of mine, and after like 3 minutes, I was so tired I was throwing up. And now I could probably handle 4 or 5 minutes. So I feel pretty young in general. HelloFresh is the meal kit delivery service that makes cooking more fun so you can focus on the whole experience, not just the final plate. Remember what they say, it's the journey and not the destination. While HelloFresh is both the journey and the destination because the food has to be good, or else what's the point? HelloFresh employs 2 full-time registered dietitians on staff who review each recipe to ensure it is nutritionally balanced. For $30 off on your first week of deliveries, visit HelloFresh.com and enter James Altucher 30 when you subscribe. Delicious ingredients you'll love to eat, simple recipes you'll love to cook. Get cooking. FreshBooks, if you're in New York City, just call me up. Let's have dinner. I really want to thank you guys. If you're a small business owner struggling to get a handle on your taxes, FreshBooks is here to help. FreshBooks is a ridiculously simple cloud accounting software that will help you cruise through tax season. It keeps all your cash flow details in one place so you know exactly what your income is. And their mobile app allows you to take pictures of your receipts and organizes them for later, which makes claiming expenses a total breeze. To get started with a 30-day free trial, go to freshbooks.com/James and enter the code JAMES in the How Did You Hear About Us section. So I have Farnoosh Torabi on. You're going to interview me.
Yes.
Welcome, Farnoosh.
Thank you for having me.
We've been working together for, I feel like it's been
a decade. I did the math last night.
A decade? But I feel like even longer, like 2004?
No.
When did you get at thestreet.com?
I got there in 2006. So
okay, so we were working since then.
Right.
So we were doing videos every day together, like on the street.
We were doing podcasts and videos before it was a thing.
Right. Then you wrote a book. You left thestreet.com. What was your first book?
You're So Money.
You're So Money. And then you did a TV show for CNBC. What's the name of the TV show?
Follow the Leader.
And you followed Gary
I
Vaynerchuk.
followed John Paul DeJoria, Tracy Anderson, the Warby Parker co-founders. It was a blast. And now, it was a great learning experience for me. And in many ways, it was, I feel like, where my podcast had taken me. So I also have a podcast, and I'm just trying to basically be you, James. That's like my goal.
I know. I think you've surpassed. Like, I haven't had a TV show. Your podcast gets millions and millions of billions of downloads. It's all about personal finance, money. But you must have like really beefed up your interview skills doing the TV show, because it's
tough.
hard stuff.
It was, literally following around these magnates for 48 hours and trying to engage with them. They have to trust you too. They're kind of like, who is this random woman who's coming into my workspace, my home, my car? I was literally following them all over town and flying in jets with them, and with cameras, of course. And of course, they agreed to do it. But I think the first 12 hours, you're just trying to get them to like you and trust you.
So the first 12 hours, that's hard work.
Yeah, because
like spending 12 hours and then interviewing and then following them around.
Yeah, and getting them to be honest with you and not feel like and forget that the cameras are there. That's part of my job.
How many cameras were there?
2, plus producers, and me, and it was overwhelming for them. I don't think that for some. I think, for Gary, he probably was used to it. But even for Gary, I got to see a side of him that I don't think most people see, where we would stop rolling, we would go and like have a little powwow, and he'd go, "Was that okay? Was that okay, guys?" He was really concerned about making sure that we were getting what we wanted and pleasing us.
But if you do 30 hours of video and you're only taking like 22
minutes.
Yeah, so it's easy to just find within 30 hours. You could basically follow anyone for 30 hours and get a 22-minute show out of it, I would think.
But you know what? It's not that easy. This is about you. What are we doing?
All right, so you're going to interview me. I'm so glad you've come on the show, just like you used to interview me 10 years ago.
I know. I came prepared.
Excellent.
I came prepared. I mean, I know a lot about you, and I think people listening to this show regularly are huge James Altucher fans. Chances are they've read everything that you've written. They've read your website. They've Googled you. And when you Google you, what comes up? Like, I Googled James Altucher, and then the next word was, guess.
I don't know.
Podcast.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's so funny how, here I've written 18 books. I'm not kidding. I've probably written about 2,500 articles since 2010, and probably since 2002, maybe close to 10,000 articles. But the podcast world is just blowing up. This is where attention spans are, which is great because I think there's a lot of valuable content here. And I think a lot of writing now, not necessarily, I hope to not my writing, but I think writing in general is a lot of kind of just rehashed concepts. Like I see so many business authors just kind of exchanging and rewording ideas and rehashing their books and so on. Like I think that whole genre is sort of dying.
Well, that's a good point, because actually I reached out to some of your listeners and my listeners, knowing that I was going to come on here and ask them about what they wanted to ask you. And I'll jump ahead because that brings to a question that somebody had, which was that, what do you think about all of these kind of quote unquote business and entrepreneurship gurus that are popping up everywhere? And on the one hand, I appreciate that there's this appreciation for entrepreneurship and leadership, and we're talking about it in like a very empowering way, and you can too, and but who do you trust, right? There's so many people. Who's a charlatan? Who's the real deal? How do you decipher?
Well, a couple things. Anytime you're studying entrepreneurship, you're not doing entrepreneurship. So if you really want to make, the point of entrepreneurship is not to say I'm an entrepreneur. The point is to provide a service to somebody that's useful so you can make a lot of money. Like, let's just be blunt. You want to make more money than you would make doing other things. So that's why you're going to be an entrepreneur. And also, hopefully, you're doing something you love and providing a service people value.
So the first thing is trying to make more money?
I mean, no, the money's a side effect. But the first thing is you believe in something that people need. So my very first business was in the mid 90s. Corporations didn't have websites. I felt corporations would eventually need websites. So I made a business, and there was like maybe a handful of people who knew how to make a website back then. So I started a business making websites for entertainment companies. And it was an easy pitch for me. All of your competitors are going to be doing it. Your people are going to start viewing all of your content on the internet as well as on TV or record stores or bookstores or whatever. So let me make your website, and we charge X. And then there would be a negotiation, and hopefully I would do it for cheaper than X. And so I provided a service I felt they needed. I charged money that I thought I would make a profit on. And then the final side effect is I made money. So then I could hire more people and pitch more clients and keep growing.
So it was a great idea. Why would they ultimately trust you, though? So what was your pitch as far as why hire James?
So that's a great question, because just seeing me, like I was like this dirtbag that
Did you
rolled
have the
into-
hair back then too?
Yeah. I was, and I had like I had no money, so I had I was just wearing like t-shirt, whatever, and just coming. I looked like a computer guy, so I think that's why they trusted me a little bit. But also, I kind of had all of these ideas of what they could do for their website. Like you could have games on your website, you could have video clips, you could do all your marketing, you could offer contests, you could, and I would always come up with ideas for each pitch. But also, very important, I always overpromised. So for every client, so they would say, we want to do this, and I'm like, well, why don't you do this plus this unbelievable thing that I didn't even know was technically possible?
And you would deliver.
And then the key for overpromising is to overdeliver. So not only would I deliver what I promised, but then I would overdeliver, because nobody knew how to price these things back then. So I would charge so much that it was easy for me to find ways to overdeliver. Like I always made sure they would be like amazed with whatever I delivered, so they would hire me for the next project, and then word of mouth would spread, and other people would hire, like, we heard about you from this guy, and then we'd hire my company for this. So again, the side effect of all of this is that I made money, and then ultimately when the internet became like this boom, I was able to sell the company. But I didn't so maybe I made a mistake. I didn't once study entrepreneurship at all. I knew zero other entrepreneurs. I had no business savvy. I had no management expertise. I knew how to sell pretty well, because I would say, I would use the basic techniques like, oh, I did the websites for X, Y, and Z. You've seen those. They're great. And then I would overpromise and overdeliver. And I would address objections like, oh, we're just... You think this is expensive, but we're just a tiny part of your marketing budget, and pretty soon billions of people will be on the internet. So, these are kind of the basic selling techniques that I now I know that a lot of people have written about these things. I know they were good selling techniques, but then it just was instinct, maybe mostly because I believed in the vision. And I think if I had read books about management or business or whatever, maybe I would have learned a little bit more. But I think my main mistake was I just wanted to make a profit, and other companies were not making profits, and they were focused on raising money and scaling the business and then doing an IPO and making billions of dollars. I didn't know anything about that. I just knew I need to sell something for more than it's worth, or for more than it took me to make it, and make a profit, and hire more employees for as cheap as possible, and then sell more stuff.
Do you regret not having built that business in that traditional way of like getting investors and hiring people, and because that would have led you down a whole different path? Yeah,
well then, look, some of my competitors at the exact same time went public and were worth billions of dollars for at least a short amount of time. Like there was a company, Razorfish, that was my main competitor. They went public, and at one point they were worth $2 billion, and the founders were worth $200 million each. And, I don't know what happened if they sold any of their stock. Eventually Razorfish...
You should get them on this podcast and talk about what happened next.
Yeah, I should. It's Craig Canerick and Jeff Dotches, who are friends of mine now, but, and they did okay, I guess. But, again, they had the business savvy that they took investment from Omnicom, the big ad agency early on. People were calling me up about investing all the time. And I said, no, we don't need any money. We're profitable. And I just didn't have any sense that that's how that business didn't always work that way, particularly in a boom situation. I should have recognized we're in a boom. I could take advantage of that by raising money and doing something more financially innovative. I didn't know anything about financial innovation. I just threw everything into making profits and being a good business and providing a good service. Just traditional business. So maybe if I knew a little bit more, I would have been a little bit more successful. That we sold for, a lot of money, but not as much money as some of my competitors.
There's something to be said about there are entrepreneurs out there that are primarily visionary, and then there are those that are really business savvy. So the vision, I think you're a visionary, and you're business savvy too, but you have an ability to see things that others do not and to go after it.
Well, I remember there was one competitor of mine, their company was called Rare Medium, and I knew all the competitors. We would kind of get together socially. There was only like a handful of us. They were 4 guys like me, just kind of like computer guys making web games on websites. And they brought someone in who was an ex-investment banker. They made him the CEO. He raised like $100 million. He merged their company into a publicly traded company that was an air conditioning company. They shut down the air conditioning business. Now they were an internet business. They went from being a $40 million valuation on the stock market to like $2 billion. And this guy made, the CEO, I don't know how the other guys did, but the CEO made like $400 million. And again, that's the difference between they were building a good, solid business, but then they combined it with somebody who was financially savvy at that time, and it really, put on steroids the amount of money they made. And again, I didn't know anything about that. Now I think 20 years later, I'm more sophisticated in that way. It's not a primary interest of mine, but I would do it differently now. But I don't see any business guru. There's no business guru that would have taught that. It's only experience. Like you have to do things. You have to sell to get better at salesmanship. You have to make things to get better at making things. You have to make management mistakes to get better at management. So you have to actually. It's great to have ideas because that's what you pitch the clients and that's how you win business. And you have to be creative and inspire people and so on. But then you have to just get down into the mud and do things. Maybe tops read one business book from a real expert, but then that's it. Don't do anything else. Just start doing stuff.
So I have a lot of questions, and just to tease your listeners so that they keep listening, and I mean, why wouldn't you keep listening? But just so you have something to look forward to, what I'm going to ask James is everything from, your minimalist lifestyle right now and how that's going. I want to talk about your dating life. I want to talk about some projects that you might have coming up on the horizon. I want to talk about what you have for breakfast in the morning. I was going to bring you an iced coffee, but then I was like, I'm not sure James drinks caffeine.
All good questions.
But let's start just because I want to put a nice bow on this little back and forth we're having about innovation and entrepreneurship. So do you watch Silicon Valley?
Yeah, I watch. I love Silicon Valley, and Silicon Valley is a great example of something that I believe strongly in. So I love comedy and television in general, and there's a lot you can learn from the TV show Silicon Valley. I think it's not 100% realistic, but it's sarcastically realistic about what does happen in Silicon Valley. Like, I don't like to actually go to San Francisco because everyone is so obsessed with, what round did you invest in?
It's so true.
Dropbox or Uber or whatever. And you're nobody if you didn't invest at like different levels of things. And, I feel like all the innovation in the country is primary. Like, let's say 90% of the innovation is happening in Silicon Valley, and you kind of have to be at the most dynamic geographic location to be part of it. But at the same time, it's so annoying, and all the people, not all, because I'm friends with a lot of the people there, but many of the people are so annoying. I just hate it, and they have so much arrogance due to the fact that they stumbled upon billions of dollars of it. In some cases lucky, in some cases not, of course. But
so recently on the show, they're looking at the main character's looking at starting like the new internet.
Yeah.
Right? What do you see as, because you had such foresight into knowing that the internet was basically going to be like going to change all of our lives. You tried to leverage that for some of your clients. What's the next big technology or innovation that will change our lives, much like the internet has?
Well, I mean, you have two things. One is the Internet of Things, which basically hooks up not just computers to the internet, but everything to the internet. So the chair you sit on will be hooked up to the internet. Like, it'll recognize it's Farnoosh. Like, oh, Farnoosh, maybe you should be eating
That's her
differently.
ass. Yep.
Maybe you should be eating differently. Maybe you should be. We're gonna take like a blood sample now. We're gonna do a DNA check. Just everything will start to be hooked up to the internet, and there'll be more and more. Applications for that, not just your temperature in your house, but everything from your refrigerator to your stereo. And we're already starting to see that. But that's one thing. And then virtual reality, it's not there yet. It's inning 0 or inning -1. But I see virtual reality where the internet was in like 1991 or 1992. Like right before the web was developed, or right when the web was developed, nobody quite knew, is this going to be big or not? But it ended up changing the entire world. And I think the virtual reality is still at that point where it's not realistic enough that the brain is willing to say, oh, okay, this is a fun experience.
Yeah.
But it's going to get there, and the uses are going to be phenomenal.
Because do you remember the first time you tooled around with the internet? I mean, I think I was 9 years old or 10 years old, over at a friend's house in Cambridge, Massachusetts, who was going to MIT, who wanted to introduce to us this thing called the internet. And he had, I think, MSN or AOL was like the portal. And I was like, I don't get it. Great. You can, I don't even know, like, I don't understand. It just did not click. It was so not inherent to how we were used to doing things. Do you remember where you were when you first
Yeah,
saw the internet?
but I first used the internet in 1986.
Excuse me, okay.
Sorry, I didn't mean to like throw in like.
Well, only a few years before I did.
So, but it was before the web, and I was a computer guy. Like I was interested in computer programming, so it was really fascinating to me.
Yeah.
But the idea that I could find a topic I was interested in, and there was something called Usenet then, which was all these news groups, all text based, and you could log into a news group of something you were interested in, like. I don't know, I was interested in like the Brady Bunch or Star Wars or whatever. And you could suddenly talk to people from like Norway about things you were commonly interested in. I had never before...
Chat rooms, remember those?
Yeah. Well, I had never before spoken to somebody outside, on the phone I would speak to my friends. And normally I would just speak to people in the room I was in, the physical room I was in. Now I'm speaking to people from Russia about things we're jointly interested in. And it was like this amazing thing. And then the web started, and this whole idea of hypertext. And I thought this is going to be a real artistic medium. I didn't think it was going to be a commercial medium. I thought, there's an opportunity for storytelling, a three-dimensional storytelling. But then gradually over time, you saw, this is going to be very important for commerce. And yeah, I was super excited about it. I mean, even in 1994, I was thinking, how can I help other companies make websites to put their schedules, and restaurants could put their menus, and I lived in a college town, so college students all had access to the computer and the first web browsers, and which was called Mosaic at the time. And it would be great to see the local restaurants and their menus, or it would be great to go on a real estate site and see rental apartments and photos. And so I would go to real estate agencies and say, hey, can I take photos and put them on the internet? And they're like, what? Like, what's the internet? And so that business business idea didn't work out. But later on,
Trulia and Zillow, caught up to it. And
but look, it took about 2 years, and then people were starting to say yes to me. For 2 years, people were saying no. I remember the first time I told HBO, the television company, you need to set up a website. And my boss said, listen, just sit back down in your cubicle. The cable guys know what they're talking about. They've been doing cable TV forever. This academic thing, the internet it's just a fad. It's not gonna hit. And so, but I'm like, no. And I would go over his head. He eventually hated me so much he stopped being my boss. I would go over his head, and finally the CEO of HBO bought HBO.com. They didn't have it. There was a medical supplies company called HBO in Atlanta, and they owned HBO.com. So HBO, the television company, bought HBO.com for $250,000, and then they got me to start making the website for them, and that basically started my company off of that. Oh, I made HBO.com, hire me to do, badboyrecords.com
There
or
you go.
americanexpress.com or whatever.
And of course, I love my HBO.
Yes, I love HBO too. Oh, and I just wanted to mention about
Yeah.
Silicon Valley. Very important. The producer is Alec Berg, who, and I just love studying the history of these things. He was the producer of Curb Your Enthusiasm for many years, which was Larry David's show on HBO. Silicon Valley's on HBO. And before he was the producer on Curb Your Enthusiasm, which is Larry David's show, he was a writer and then producer on Seinfeld. So all of these people, to be successful and to have all these great successful shows, he's like a guy like Alec Berg, who we barely know, but we know all his products. He surrounded himself with guys like Jerry Seinfeld and Larry David when he was a young man just writing for the show. He then stayed with them, became the producer, grew up with them, stuck with Larry David, then stuck with HBO, and now he's a producer of and creator of one of the best shows on TV. Like, that's a good story of success.
Who's your inner circle?
I mean, I don't know. It changes a lot because my interests change a lot. So it depends. If I'm interested in writing, I call my writer friends, and they're all good, successful writers that I want to learn from. So on this podcast a lot has been Stephen Dubner, who wrote Freakonomics, AJ Jacobs, who's written a bunch of bestsellers, Cheryl Strayed, who wrote, Wild, that became a movie, Hugh Howey, who wrote Wool, Andy Weir, who wrote The Martian. So there's a lot of writers that I speak to and a lot of nonfiction writers that have come on the show. Later today, I'm interviewing Chuck Klosterman, who's written a lot of nonfiction pop culture essays that have all been bestsellers. So I have a lot of writers on the show. On the business side, I don't really know, but I think that's why I'm not a billionaire. I don't hang out with a lot of.
Have you ever had great mentorship? Is there somebody or some resource that's been a really great source of wisdom and guidance for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've had, just like you probably have had, I think I've had hundreds of mentors. Like, people think, oh, you need just one mentor and that person's going to guide you.
And you have to have all these one-on-ones and talk through things. Sometimes you just have to be aware of who these people are that you admire and watch them. And that's mentorship in some ways. It's like
yeah. I mean, I would
taking
say
a back seat in their life. And
right, like I would say everybody I've had on my podcast has been a mentor, because that's the great thing about a podcast, which I'm sure you know, which is you have this chance to sit down next to somebody and ask them any question you want for an hour, and you better ask them because you're never going to see them
Right.
again. So I'm going to, if I have Peter Thiel or Mark Cuban on, I'm going to ask them every question I can ask.
did you ask Peter Thiel about his affiliation with Donald Trump?
No, because I had Peter Thiel on over 2 years ago, so it was before then. But he's a smart guy about business, so I was able to ask him all these incredible business questions that I never would have been able to ask anyone in person. I can't call Peter Thiel up and say, "Hey, can you talk to me for an hour about how to be a billionaire?"
Right.
But on a podcast, you can do that. And so those are kind of these virtual mentors. But then, like you and I, we hung out with Jim Cramer for many years. He started TheStreet.com. He started a hedge fund. He's written some great books. He's had a very successful TV show. People could criticize him all day long because he's kind of a very eccentric guy. But I'll tell you one thing he told me. He was really upset at me once. CNBC kept calling me, "Come on CNBC and give your commentary about the financial markets." And I just would not return their calls. Like, I just would just blow them off. And Jim Cramer came up to me one time and he's like, "You're embarrassing me. Why aren't you returning their calls?" And I'm like, I don't want to go on TV. I don't want to promote myself. It's about the business I'm doing. It's not about me. And he's like, "Listen, if you don't promote yourself, nobody else is going to promote you." And so I always remember that. Like, it's very true. And
You have to be your biggest advocate. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not like you should be out there like, "Oh, look at me." But if somebody gives you an opportunity to say a vision that you believe in and that you're
Right.
inspired by, then you better go out and do it, because
show
no one
up
else
for
is
that
gonna-
vision. Yeah.
Show up for that, because it's important to get your unique word out. Make sure you have something unique to say so that you're not just one of those bland, 8 people in a box
Right.
arguing with each other on CNBC. Make sure you're the one person saying what you're saying. But he was right. That was a good thing to say. Also, I saw how hard he worked.
So
like,
hard.
that guy got to work at 5 a.m, and I don't think he stopped working till midnight every night. And I would text him sometimes 2 a.m. He would text back instantly. And every weekend, he was
Yeah.
preparing for a show. He would text me all day long. "What about this idea? What about this idea? What about this idea?" he was thinking constantly. That guy never stopped. He was worth hundreds of millions. He never stopped working. I still don't think he ever stops working. And then I've had mentors like that in hedge funds, in writing, in writing fiction I'm very interested in right now, in comedy I'm very interested in TV. I pitched TV shows to HBO. I had great mentors there. In every area of life, even in chess, learning chess, the first thing I would do is I would find an instructor and I would take lessons. I would learn from the best in every field that I was ever interested in. That's who's the best and how can I learn from them. That's the first thing I do.
All right, so let's fast forward to today. We're recording this. It's June 1st.
That's right. It's June 1st.
Happy June.
I can't believe. I feel like 2017 just started.
My daughter slept 10 hours last night, so I am energized. I got my iced coffee.
I can't believe you have a daughter.
And a son. And you have 2 daughters.
Wait. When we were first doing videos, were you married?
No, I was single, and there was no Tinder back then, so I was hopelessly dating. And not that Tinder's the answer for everything, but it's like I didn't know where to begin with being in New York. And I was working so hard. I ended up marrying a guy I went to college with. So you never know who's sitting next to you and how that is going to transpire in 10 years.
I remember at one point I was in between marriages and I was dating, and I called you up for a recipe because I wanted to cook for a girl I was dating.
Yep. And I gave you a really good one.
You gave me this great recipe, and I was in the grocery store, and I was buying all the things you were saying.
It was salmon. I remember.
Yeah, it was some kind of salmon thing. And I would have to wrap it in foil.
Mm-hmm. Honey mustard. I think it was garlic and some herbs and salt and pepper and maybe some lemon. Whatever. Was it a good date?
Oh my God, it was yeah. I don't know if the date was that good, but and that relationship was a disaster, but I
think it was a fellow colleague.
Yes. That meal though was excellent.
I still make it.
And that's probably the last time I've ever cooked.
Well,
so it was like
10
so
years
what
ago.
do you
so I want to ask you, I haven't gotten to my long list of questions yet because you're just so good. Everything you say makes me think of another question, but I did want to ask you about your diet. What do you eat these days? Are there any things that you're not eating? I know you're into bulletproof coffee now, right?
Yeah, and Dave Asprey's been on my podcast, I think 3 times. And so bulletproof coffee is, let's just say at a very basic level, it's coffee with some extra carbs, not carbs, some extra calories and fat and protein in it. And
butter.
Yeah, butter and coconut, kind of a version of coconut oil.
Yeah.
He calls it brain octane oil, but it's kind of a
he's franchising that. It's gonna be, they're gonna be little coffee shops all over.
Oh yeah, he's raised a ton of money now. I knew him before he was starting Bulletproof, and I remember I called him one time and I said, "Oh, I just tried your idea for Bulletproof coffee, and I wrote 40,000 words on a book this weekend." It put me it was like coffee on steroids. But I do have to say, when you throw in that many calories into the coffee, I was feeling a little bit nauseous afterwards. And the idea is you feel so full, you don't need food until 2 in the afternoon, and so you lose weight by having this bulletproof coffee. Plus, you get a lot of energy. But I don't do that anymore.
So, did you have you're drinking Poland spring water?
Yeah, so I have. I wake up, I have coffee, I read for a couple of hours, I write for a couple of hours, then I'll eat a breakfast, usually with some protein in it. But I tend to be pescatarian, so fish and vegetables, but and then no red meat or chicken or anything like that. And I tend to do 2 meals a day and no snacks. And the reason is...
Do you stop eating at a certain point?
Yeah, I try to not eat past 5 or 6
wow.
p.m. Because you want to have time before... You don't want to go to sleep on a full stomach.
It's true. You'll lose a lot of weight that way.
Yeah, and if you have time to digest the food before you go to sleep, and then by the way, then you wake up at 5 or 6,
burn calories.
And then then I work a little bit on the coffee, and then I don't eat again until 10 or 11. It's like this intermittent fasting that you do every day. So I don't eat for 16 hours, and that's a nice fast. It gives you time to digest and metabolize the food before more food comes in, and And the 2 meals a day, I'm not recommending it for everyone. It's just I'm older now. And if you eat like 3 big meals a day, it's just you're going to gain
You will
weight.
get bigger.
So, and people sort of forget that they eat the same at 20, 30, 40, 50 years old. And your metabolism changes every decade. If you don't change the way you're eating, you're just going to naturally get bigger
Yes.
and less healthy. All that extra foods related to inflammation throughout the body. Then you get diabetes, or there's links to dementia, or there's links to cancer, or there's links to all sorts of diseases and stomach ailments. And so I just keep it simple and eat as simply as possible.
And you don't cook, so where are your best restaurants in New York City? Do you have?
By the way, the no cooking is important. So here's what I call the Airbnb diet, which is that I never have food in the house. Because if I have food in the house, and I never go shopping. Because if I go shopping, I'm going to buy snacks. And if I have snacks in the house, all of those snacks are going to end up in my stomach. So if I have a bag of potato chips, it's good. All of those potato chips are going to end up in my stomach. And I just picture that bag like in my stomach. And so the Airbnb diet is I always have no food in the house and I always order out. People say, oh, well, aren't you eating, the foods are too rich? The answer is no. First off, world famous chefs cook for me every day, basically, and they have the food is delivered to me, and I don't have to clean anything up. I just throw everything back in the bag and throw it out. So it saves time incredibly. I never have to cook. I never have to clean, and I have world famous chefs putting together the best meals possible for me. Second off,
and that's because you're in New York, and if you're going to be a chef in New York, you're pretty good.
Yeah,
what you do.
And pretty much any city or even most towns, the local restaurants are going to be pretty good and will deliver, or you could pick up food. In my old town, which was 60 miles north of New York, I would order takeout and just bring the food back. And I would go to the best restaurant, order takeout, take the food back. But the other thing is, even on desserts, it's not like you can order a bag of Doritos for dessert at a restaurant. Okay, I'll have like a slice of apple pie. It's not going to be as bad for me as a bag of Doritos or a bag of popcorn or whatever. Popcorn's not so bad, but like most snacks that you buy in the store are bad. When I go into a grocery store, I can't help it. I love all the crappy snacks.
I know everything that's in the middle. My friend who's a chef, and she offers some healthy advice. She's like, if you're going to go grocery shopping, stick to the perimeter of the grocery store.
So I've heard that. I never do it. Like because the store is set up for you. You can't, you can't fight evolution. So we're designed over millions of years, essentially, to go to the middle of the store and buy all the carbs, because our brain says, "Oh, I could pick up grass and eat it all day long. The grass is all over the place. But when am I going to get a donut ever again?" Right. Like the brain is like, "Oh my God, sweets and donuts and fats and oils. I better and." All the way up until the cashier, there's donuts right in front of you everywhere you turn. So your brain, now your willpower is, when you wake up in the morning and you're rejuvenated, that's when your willpower is at its peak level. Mm-hmm. But at night, when people tend to go shopping, after work, your willpower is at its lowest level. And this is just, again, evolution. It's how the brain is meant to be. You can't fight it, and you shouldn't fight it, because then that will deplete other areas of your brain.
Which is why online shopping for food is actually helpful.
Yeah, online shopping is fine. But again, that's why I just online, when I need food, we live right now in an access economy. So I have access right now to anything I need. If I need a car downstairs, I don't need to buy a car. I'll just call an Uber. If I need a place to live, I don't need to own a home. I'll get an Airbnb. If I need food, I don't need to buy like 20 weeks of food as if the apocalypse is about to happen and store it in my storage container. I'll just order delivery from, you could even order a meal delivered from Whole Foods or from the grocery store in most cases, in most towns around the country. So we live in an access economy. You might as well take use of it. It's healthier, and you could live longer and happier. Like I don't get sick. I don't have colds because you moderate everything, and
food is medicine.
You have more time, so I sleep 8 or 9 hours, and it's great. I get rejuvenated. I'm creative in the morning. I use the morning as my maker hours. That's where I create and make things, and then I use the afternoon as my management hours. That's when I do admin and respond to emails. And I manage various businesses. That's when I manage my businesses. And then at night, I have fun. So I'll play and have fun and enjoy life. And
What's fun for you?
Tonight I'm going to do stand-up comedy on stage. So I want to learn a new skill. I have a club that I go to. It's a full lineup of
Have you
professional
ever
comedians.
bombed? Have you been watching the show on HBO about
Crashing?
crashing? Are you that guy right now?
I'd like to think I'm a little better than that guy where he's starting. I mean, Pete Holmes is a famous comedian now, but he's pretending to be like a kind of up and coming comedian. But I do pretty well, but I have bombed. And because when you do it long enough, you're gonna bomb occasionally.
You have to.
Yeah. And also you have crowds of, you don't know who the crowd is. And it's different from public speaking. Like public speaking is 10 times harder than speaking, say. And then stand-up comedy is about 10 times harder than public speaking. So you and I are good public speakers. We've been doing it for 10, 20 years. But then I can't believe how much harder stand-up comedy is.
Because it's about timing, and it's reacting to the room. When you're up at a podium giving a speech, you don't really have to react to the room. You just do your thing and get,
Right, and the topic is a gimmick almost. Okay,
right.
It's Farnoosh talking about finance. So
it is what it is.
You
It's
can
very
fall back
straightforward.
on the topic, but there's no topic in stand-up comedy, and it's people who don't know you, and they're there not to help you. They just want you to make them laugh, and it's different. You can tell stories in public speaking that make people laugh. But comedy is different than storytelling. You have to have like a punchline and all these other things going on. And it scares the heck out of me. So I wanted to get better at it. And I'll tell you, since I've gotten better at it, my public speaking has gotten better. Like the last time you and I spoke on stage was about a month ago. I had already done stand-up comedy for about a month at that point. And I really felt just much more kind of control over my public speaking. Like the mic went out halfway through my talk and no problem. I kind of went into the audience and just ripped it up.
Also, you were the last to speak, so that's hard, right? Because it's the end of the night, everyone's eaten, they're a little tired, and so there's more pressure to try to go out with a bang.
Yeah, which I felt like
you did.
Yeah.
You totally did.
Yeah,
You
and
did
so
a total mic drop.
I feel like if I hadn't been doing stand-up, I would have had a harder time. So I just, in general, so play for me is learning a new skill or playing a game. I'll play poker with friends or chess, or we'll go bowling or play ping pong. I have ping pong lessons scheduled for Monday with a world champion ping pong player. And then I'm going to do lessons with him a couple times and then have him on the show. Like he grew up in the ghetto.
Well, there's a
then became
video
ping pong
series for
champion.
you called James Having Fun.
Well, I was thinking of an idea called James Does Stuff. Where I'll do like weird stuff. Like a friend of mine last night wrote me and said, hey, you want to go to Haiti? And I said, why? And he said, well, I'm trying to convince the president to sell his UN vote for like $1 billion. And I'm like, sure. And he says, but the key is to have fun. And I'm like, all right, my bags are packed. Just tell me when. And I forget what country named, to be honest. He named like 5 Caribbean countries. And so he's finding the one that will actually invite him. But I'm like, okay, I'm in.
Bags are packed. I'm in. So you're turning 50 next year?
Yeah, next year in January, I'm turning 50. I don't feel 50. But
What do you
I'm
feel?
turning
You
it.
feel like 35, 25?
I remember when I was 24, I played basketball with some friends of mine. And after like 3 minutes, I was so tired, I was throwing up. And now I could probably handle 4 or 5 minutes. So I feel like pretty young
Double
in general.
the time.
Yeah.
If you were to write your autobiography, and I feel like you already have.
Yeah, I feel
'cause
like I do
you
it every day.
You do it every day. So what would the book be called, and what title would you give to the chapter about the life you're living today?
Choose yourself.
No, you can't say that.
I can't say that?
No, you can't promote your books in your answer.
Okay. And then I will call it James Does Stuff, because I feel like I'm always impressed with people like who like I once asked Mark Cuban, what did you really want to be when you grew up? And he said, no, I just wanted to be rich. And so he like started a bar. He made money at that. He started a software business. He made 20 million at that. He started a hedge fund. He made another 50 million at that. He started broadcast.com, made 2 billion. He bought the Mavs.
And he
worth
seems
4
to be
billion.
a nice guy.
Yeah, he's a
you
nice
think
guy. He's
someone who
great.
talks like that is an asshole.
No, he's a great guy. And but he was very focused from the age of like his teenage years on, making more and more money, and he's super smart, and he was very creative, and he always combined it with his interests, but he was able to monetize his interests every step of the way, and he became super, super wealthy. And I was never like that. Like, I wanted to write novels. I was interested in computers, but then I got thrown out of graduate school. Then I wanted to make a TV show. So I worked at HBO, but that got me into the making websites. So I started a company, which I was no good at. But then losing all this money, starting the company, that convinced me to get interested in finance. So I started a hedge fund. Then I started writing about finance for TheStreet.com. Then I started writing about personal improvement because I failed so many times and kind of came out of it. And then I started doing other TV stuff. And then this podcast. Now I run a bunch of businesses in almost every sector of the economy. So I'm just constantly
doing things.
And I feel like if I had stuck to one thing, maybe I'd have like $10 billion. Who knows? Because
that book, The One Thing, I bought it and I never finished it because I got busy doing other things.
Right. And I think it's actually more fun and a more fulfilling life to not just do one thing. Now, that said, I think it could be very fulfilling to do one thing and be the best in the world at it, because then you appreciate the subtleties of what it takes to be the best in the world at something. But I really enjoy, I fall in love with new things, like let's say every 6 months to a year, and I really want to get good at them. Not necessarily the best in the world, but good enough to appreciate the subtleties of the best. And it's so much fun, that steep part of the learning curve, like just climbing that on lots of different areas. And I feel if you do that, if you climb that steep learning curve on lots of different things, it puts you in the top, let's say 98 percentile of whatever area you become fascinated by. And it's just so much fun for me to learn these things. I remember one time I had on the podcast Brian Koppelman, who's written movies,
I love that guy.
TV shows, everything. And he's written some of my favorite movies and shows. And he said, don't write what you know, write what fascinates you. And I'm just constantly fascinated by different things. And I just love learning all these different things, whether it's playful things or monetary things or podcasting and how to communicate, or comedy and how to make people laugh and yet communicate deeper hidden truths. And so, and all these things are interrelated, but, and they're all related to success. Like we talked about Silicon Valley, but also the success path of the creator of Silicon Valley. And they're all related to success and peak performance. So that's why I'm fascinated by all these different topics. And even though my show is about peak performance and success, I look at it not from a business point of view, but from every area of life, from sports to artists to writers to business to astronauts to everything. Let's stop to take a quick break. We'll be right back. HelloFresh is the meal kit delivery service that makes cooking more fun so you can focus on the whole experience, not just the final plate. I just recently started eating HelloFresh, and I have to say, it's been a really great decision for me, and I'll tell you why. The recipe cards are so easy to follow, and I am not a good cook, so I need those recipe cards. The food is pre-measured for you, so there's no waste, which is also really important for me, and everything tastes fresh. They call themselves a fork-to-feel-good company, too, because when you cook and eat delicious and healthy meals, you want to keep doing it again and again. Kind of like that, fork-to-feel-good. Plus, it's only $10 a meal. HelloFresh currently offers customers a classic box, a veggie box, and a family box. Don't order from HelloFresh if you want the Cheetos box. That's Cheetos Fresh. Different company completely. Customers can order 3 to 5 different meals per week designed for 2 or 4 people. New recipes are created every week. For $30 off your first week of deliveries, visit HelloFresh.com and enter James Altucher 30 when you subscribe. Delicious ingredients you'll love to eat and simple recipes you'll love to cook. Get cooking. If you're a small business owner who struggles with tax stuff, you don't have to stress anymore, because freaking out and burying your head in the sand will not solve your problems come tax time. But what will help you with paperwork and tax stuff and so on is bringing FreshBooks into your world. FreshBooks is the ridiculously easy-to-use cloud accounting software that's made for people like you and me who can't stand doing their taxes. Seriously, it will transform the way you handle your taxes, because FreshBooks keeps all of your cash flow details in one place, so you know exactly what invoices you sent, who's paid you, and what your income is. And their mobile app allows you to take pictures of your receipts and organize them for later, which makes claiming expenses a total breeze. This is my Achilles heel, is keeping track of all those receipts. So FreshBooks lets you do it with their mobile app. It's everything you need to stay completely zen come tax time and not panicked. So for a 30-day free trial, just go to freshbooks.com/James, because they love this podcast so much, and enter the code James in the How Did You Hear About Us section. That's freshbooks.com/James, and enter the code James in the How Did You Hear About Us section.
You mentioned Airbnb a little while ago, which is where you're living right now in various Airbnbs. You recently sold all your possessions. You've been nomading around the city with 15 things.
Yeah.
Total.
So this is the outfit you see me in? This is like my outfit.
So you're wearing, who are you wearing, James?
This is me. I'm like a...
Is that a Gap button down or?
No, it's maybe a Brooks Brothers pants, which is relatively cheap. You get them on sale. They usually have like an end
You
of
don't
season
have to
sale.
justify it.
And all right, I won't. I bought it top dollar. And maybe like a kitten A shirt, and then no belt, and then sneakers and black sneakers, so you can wear them in business functions or sneaker functions.
I would have thought of you as more like a polka dot sock guy, or like, someone who has fun with their socks.
No, I don't like to. I don't like
It's
to
so
have
hip
fun
right
with
now.
my clothing at all. I think people who kind of put billboards on themselves, I just don't like the purple glasses or whatever. I don't really. That's fine for them, but for myself, I don't like it. It's
Someone
just,
actually wanted to know about your wardrobe and how you.
I keep it as I'm dressed like a waiter all the time, so I'm here to serve.
Dixie, that was Dixie. You got your question answered. So
So I have two outfits, and then I do laundry, or I'll buy new outfits. And
you do your own laundry, or you send it out?
No, I do it. Usually wherever I'm Airbnb-ing, there's a
James
washing
does his
machine.
own laundry, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, you just throw it in the washing machine.
It's
boom,
really easy.
Hit a button, throw them in the dryer, hit a button.
But then you have to.
and it's done.
You don't have to
I don't
fold
them.
because
No.
you don't. Right.
Yeah, and then the pharmacy, like Walgreens, you can buy this T-shirts from Walgreens. You could buy
Walgreens has T-shirts.
Yeah, you could buy a pack of 3 for
Like
$14.
Hanes T-shirts or something.
Yeah, Hanes
Okay.
T-shirts. This is a Hanes T-shirt.
I know
And,
my Walgreens. Well, why did you decide? What was the moment where you were like, "That's it, I'm selling everything"? Where were you? What happened?
So I had a kind of a like a big emotional crisis about a year and a half ago. And at the same time, I was renting 2 different places, one in Manhattan and one in Cold Spring, New York, which is where my kids live, it's about 60 miles north. And both leases were up at the same time. And I had 40 years worth of baggage with me. All the stuff you don't realize how much stuff eventually you have. Like your parents pass away, so you get all your stuff from there, and you have all the stuff you buy, like all your books, all the stuff from your kid, all your kids' stuff, all your you have all this. You don't realize how much stuff you have. And this wasn't a minimalist decision. I call this this was a choicist decision, meaning during the day, let's say you make 1,000 choices about your life. Some of those choices are choices you want to make, and some of those choices are like, I really don't want to make this choice, but I have to because it's part of my life. So an example is, do I really have to buy another couch because this couch is ruined? Or do I really have to buy another set of clothes? Or do I really have to go shopping? Or do I really have to renew this lease? And then think about that and think about, this is where I want to stay for the next 4 years or whatever. So I decided I wanted to make a greater percentage of my day's choices about what I wanted to do, instead of all these random admin sort of choices that I don't care about. So I decided I called up a friend of mine, Lisa, and I said to her, you go to both my places, take a truck, and for everything I own, everything, 100%. I don't want to see anything ever again. You can either donate everything, you can keep anything you want.
Who's Lisa?
So she's just a friend of mine.
Who's this lucky Lisa who got
Yeah.
to basically inherit all your stuff?
She's helped me with a bunch of different things over time, like over the past 20 years. And I wanted her to be successful and have, a little extra money. And I said, you can either sell everything and keep the money, and keep anything, donate anything, or give anything away to family members or whatever. And I'll pay you to do this, just to throw everything out. And for me, it was as if I was throwing everything out. Like, I didn't care what happened.
There wasn't a single thing that you were like, I'm going to put this in my pocket.
Well, she called me up in the middle, and I said, it'll take you a weekend. It actually took her about 2 weeks of she rented like an 18-wheeler truck. She brought her, like my daughter.
Did you document this? This would have been great footage.
I did not. I should have. But I wanted to have nothing to do with it because I didn't want to be sentimental at all. Like Marie Kondo has this book, The Magic Art of Tidying Up. And she's like, oh, put everything on the ground. Like, if you love it, keep it. I don't love any objects. Like, objects are dead. I don't love them. I don't love anything that's dead. And so everything, even like the Dr. McCoy doll from Star Trek that I've had since I was a little kid that was sitting right next to my computer. I throw it out. I had like paintings and artwork and, artwork done by my kids. I told my kids a day in advance if there was anything they wanted, take it. They didn't want anything. And the only time Lisa called me up was she said, I'm about to throw out your diploma because there's nothing. I'm not going to donate. I'm not going to keep it. I'm about to throw out your diploma. You worked really hard for it. It's nicely framed. You sure you want me to throw that out? And I said, turn on the fireplace. If there's a button, you can turn it on and just burn it because no one has asked me about my diploma in 25 years. So just get rid of that. And she said, are you sure? And I said, Lisa, I told you not to call me during this entire process. Don't call me again. And she's told me afterwards, she threw out over 100 garbage bags filled with stuff.
At least.
I thought I had maybe like 10 garbage bags and then some furniture. She said, no, it was she said because I had like a lot of rooms. I lived like in what had been in Cold Spring. I rented like what was used to be a hotel. And so there was all these like extra rooms and apartments. And I had stuff like stuck in every drawer. And she just threw out so much. She brought her nephews, her kids, her husband, her cousins. And my daughter called me up once and she was like, Dad, there's this entire family of people coming in the house and pulling things out.
I didn't know I had a third cousin.
And I'm like, Josie, just let it happen, but make sure, if you want anything, now's your chance. And so, and I just never saw any of those things again. And all I had with me was a travel bag, like that fits in your above your seat in an airplane or underneath your seat. So what
did you end up keeping? I heard something like some $2 bills.
So I kept a plastic bag filled with about 2,000 $2 bills, and I keep $2 bills because they're great to tip with. If you tip with $2 bills, nobody ever forgets you. Like, you're the guy.
And they won't spend it.
Yeah, they won't spend it. It's lucky. They are grateful forever to you, and they always remember you. So I'll go into a restaurant, and it's like, oh, best table. And
hopefully you tip more than $2 when you go into a restaurant.
Oh, yeah. No, but let's say it's a $50 tip. I'll count out like 25 $2 bills.
Oh, wow.
And they're amazed. And they're like, where do you get the $2 bills? And I said, I have a really good copy machine. So it's always like,
it's fake.
Yeah, it's always like room to make me the center of attention in these situations. And then I basically kept 2 or 3 outfits and a laptop computer and a phone. And that's about it. Nothing else. So,
your ID and obviously
yeah,
your
I have
wallet,
a passport,
yeah.
but I count that with my outfit. Like, I don't count each individual dollar bill like as a different thing. So, and then when I need new things like a toothbrush or whatever, I just go to the pharmacy and then use it. And when I move Airbnbs, I usually throw everything out again and restart.
So is this it?
I moved yesterday, for instance, from one place to another.
And Airbnb is helping you out on this mission, right?
Not necessarily, but Airbnb heard about it because I was like their most aggressive user. And so I remember one time the owner of an Airbnb I was in calls me up and says, hey, right downstairs, the head of hospitality of all of Airbnb is staying and he wants to meet you.
No way.
Yeah, so I said, sure, what a coincidence. And so he came upstairs, he brought a bottle of wine because he's the head of hospitality for all Airbnb. I don't really drink, but he brought the bottle of wine anyway. And we had this. I turned on the tape, on the laptop. I recorded it as a podcast. We had a great podcast about Airbnb, and I used my standard technique, which is I had written down as just practice a year earlier 10 ideas how Airbnb should be better. I pitched all of them to him. He said, "This is great. why don't you come and speak at the Airbnb Open? So I went, I was like, the Airbnb Open is this conference for like 15,000 home owners or apartment owners who rent out their homes. And I was like the super guest. So I brought all my belongings on the stage and said, I just moved onto this stage. Let me tell you all what you're doing good and what you're doing bad. And I had a fun time. But they keep in touch now, the Airbnb guys. It's a good company. And I just love it. I love staying in like
Other people's homes. Going through other people's bathrooms.
All the time. I'm a total voyeur.
Do you go through their medicine cabinets?
Of course, yeah. And I go through everything and I learn about their lives. I Google them. I really could write a book about all the people. I've stayed in some really impressive people's
I think that's your
places.
next book, right?
Like I've stayed in the houses
Sponsored
of
by Airbnb.
international central bankers. I've stayed in movie stars' houses, famous singers' houses. And my kids will often decide on their custody situation depending on what Airbnb I'm staying at. I'll send them a link to where the Airbnb is and the map and the location and the rooms that they're going to be in. And they'll say, okay, I'll stay with you this week. And it's just fun. But yeah, yesterday I moved again. But the moving is easy. It's just I pack up my one bag and I'm out. I wake up and within 15 minutes I've moved. Nobody has ever moved as easily.
You probably saved yourself hundreds of hours a year. Being able to then take ping pong classes and stand up and all that stuff.
Right. All of this stuff is about so I can now choose to do the things I really want to do as much as possible. I never have to think about maintaining my house. I never have to think about...
What about dating, though? That's got to be weird when you're dating and...
Oh, let me just say one thing about renting, because I used to be all about renting versus owning. I'm not even about renting. The last time I rented in New York, I had to get 5 references, including a business reference and all sorts of references. I had to get a letter from my accountant because they didn't understand the multiple streams of income thing. I had to get a letter from my lawyer. I had saying I was a good guy. I don't know why they needed that.
Where were you trying to live? The White House?
Okay. There's you remember the pop singer Vanessa Carlton?
Yes.
So 1,000 Miles or something like that. That's
yes.
a big song. Yeah, so it was her apartment. I didn't even realize that. I sent the lease to my business partner to check over, and he said, do you know who you're renting from? And I'm like, oh, some woman.
One-hit wonder, Vanessa Carlton.
Yeah, and he said, check out this video on YouTube. It has 100 million views. And I'm like, oh, that's who I'm renting from. And then I have a horrible credit score because I've never owned, in my entire life, I've never owned a credit card. Now I have a debit card, but if you don't own a credit card, you have no credit score. So if you missed a mortgage payment 15 years ago, then that's the only thing on your credit score. So I have this horrible credit score.
Oh, James.
And so every person who lived in Vanessa's building had to meet me. And so the guy who casted Seinfeld and many other famous shows, he lived right above me and he had to meet me and everybody had to meet me.
That's pretty cool.
It was cool, but it was like almost a full-time job to rent one simple apartment. And then, by the way, they threw me out of the apartment 3 or 4 months later. So because they wanted to, they raised the price like 50% and they just found an excuse to get me out of there. And they wanted the Airbnb. They're Airbnb-ing like 50% more than I was paying. And so that's the last time I rented. I've been Airbnb.
So is this it now? This is your final chapter in terms of how you're going to, pursue your lifestyle is to go from one apartment to the next?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it all
and
I know.
How does that impact your dating life? Let's be honest.
All I know is today. So today, anything can happen. Tomorrow, if somebody says, "Oh, you can rent this place for $1 a year," I'll certainly take that. And if it's a huge place and whatever, but I like to do new things. So I think I would get bored in a place after a few months. But do
you think it's hard to find someone like a companion who is like-minded and willing to pursue this with you? It's been hard.
And I think also it's hard to raise kids that way. But my kids have been great. I mean, they live with their mom, but they've also been great. Like wherever I'm Airbnb-ing, they're very happy to move with me and be around in different places around the city or around the country when I have them. But so they've been my kids have been great about it. And they also know they just know that I'm a little, it's hard for me to stay in one place for better or for worse. I need when I date, and I am dating someone who's really accepting of moving around from place to place, and I would say she calls it more minimalism than I do. I call it, like I said, I think a homeless person is minimalist, so I don't deign to call myself a minimalist, but a homeless person is really a minimalist. I think it's almost an insult to homeless people for anybody to write about minimalism. But she's since meeting me, she's trimmed her possessions and clothes in a way that I think is women in general have more items than men. You know, they have cosmetics, they have dresses, they have this, they have that. And I'm very, I'll work out in the exact same clothes I'm wearing right now. So I'll play tennis with my kids in these clothes, and I don't care. But other people have gym clothes and clothes for this and clothes for that. I went to a fancy event at an embassy the other night, and I was just wearing this, and everybody else was in a
But
suit.
people just know to expect that from you, right? And that's kind of cool that you can.
Or if they don't, then I'll just leave. Like, I don't care.
You have nothing to lose at this
Yeah.
point, literally and figuratively.
Right, and it's not just because of money. Like, if somebody doesn't like me for who I am, then I don't want to pretend. I don't want to be something I'm not, and I don't like wearing a suit for his. I like wearing a tuxedo, actually. So I wish my one outfit was a tuxedo, but that's also I don't feel.
You can't really work out in a tuxedo.
Yeah, and I feel like a tuxedo will very quickly get beyond repair in dirtiness and ripped
And then
so on.
well, and then it also you stick out a lot. Do you like being the center of attention?
Not when I'm just like walking around
But you like having a spotlight.
Yeah, I can't help it. That's why anybody likes to write or do a podcast. You
Sure,
like it too. It's
sure.
what you've had a TV show. You're the center of attention when you have a CNBC show and you're walking around the street. People probably stop you and say Farnoosh.
You'd be surprised. No, the thing I got more recognized for in my entire career was two things. Was my Yahoo series on Yahoo. I did a show for them every day. We would talk about, because Yahoo gets like 1 billion people going every
It used
month.
to, but when you were doing the show, yes.
Yes,
it was very popular. It
in-
was much more popular than any TV station.
Oh, it's so sad to see what's happening at Yahoo now. I feel like when I was there, when my colleagues, we were all working, we just were making such wonderful videos and content. And I felt like we were given so much freedom.
More people would recognize me from going on Yahoo shows than CNBC or Fox
It's
or
where
ABC.
the eyeballs are.
But now I feel media is so splintered and granular. There is no one place anymore.
That's true.
That even if you're on the Today Show, it doesn't matter. It's not. There's no one medium that's your thing. That's anybody's thing.
But
like ratings have gone straight down, not for TV as a medium, but for any one show.
I agree. Yeah, I think maybe going on Ellen would be great.
But even that, okay, that's maybe a morning show 20 years ago would have gotten 30 million viewers.
Yeah.
Now it gets 2 million viewers.
Yeah. Well, we had mentioned your kids, and Kristen here has a question. If you could not pass on any money to your children and all you could pass on was investment strategies, rules, a portfolio, what would it be?
Okay, so that's a great question. First off, I want to address the money thing. Everybody's always afraid of two things: talking to their kids about money because, and maybe giving their kids money because maybe it'll take their motivation away. Motivation happens whether or not they have money. I strongly believe. And if they didn't want to work as a lawyer or an accountant just because they had money, then fine. Don't work as a lawyer or an accountant. Hopefully you won't have a brain dead life. But I always am upfront with my kids about how much money I have, where it's coming from, if I'm broke or not. When I've been broke, I've been upfront with them. When I've had money, I've been upfront with them. How I make money, I take my kids to business meetings, and my kids are CC'd on all emails involving my investments. And I'm just going to blanket give them my money. I don't care how old they are, how responsible they are, whatever. Doesn't matter to me after I'm dead anyway. But if I didn't have anything to give them, which I may or may not, I'm known for going broke at odd moments. But if I didn't have anything to give them, the most important thing is to understand how to make money. And there's the way to make money is by ownership. You can't make it from salary. You have to own something.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to either start a business or invest in a business. And if you invest in a business, the key to investing in business is to assume you're the dumbest person in the room, or find the room where you're the dumbest person in the room, and find the CEO who's smarter, find the co-investors who are smarter, and just piggyback on them. So my most successful investments have always been where, here's a CEO who's built and sold a similar business before. Of course, I'm going to back him. And meanwhile, here's I'm making this up, but here's Peter Thiel and Warren Buffett, and they're investing in the business. Am I going to argue with them? No, I'm going to invest alongside of them. And those businesses 100% of the time work out. And when I don't follow that strategy, 100% of the time they fail. It's black and white.
And you do this also with investing. I read on CNBC.com where you said like more or less Warren Buffett is like your unpaid intern.
Yeah, like let's just give it as an example. Right. Let's say Warren Buffett buys Amazon at $1,000 a share. And I'll say, okay, that's interesting. Maybe he's right, maybe he's not. Now let's say it goes down to 900 because stocks go up and they go down no matter what. And then I think to myself, oh my gosh, the best investor in the world who's worth $90 billion bought Amazon, 12% higher than I can. He just gave me a 10% discount on his investment, and I can invest in Amazon now without paying Warren Buffett anything. Like, he just did all the research, and he's the smartest investor in the world. He did all the research. He called up Jeff Bezos and said, what's happening next? And he got all the inside information and got all the inside scoop, and all the PhDs working for him said, Amazon's going to be here 10, 20 years from now, and this is what it's going to be doing. Okay, I don't know anything, but Warren Buffett did all the work for me. All he needs to do now is get me a cup of coffee, and he really is my intern. But even better, he gave me a 10% discount on $1 billion investment he made. Why wouldn't I invest in that? Why wouldn't anybody invest in that? So what I tend to do is I follow hedge funds, and I use software to figure out which hedge funds or mutual funds seem to be the most creative at coming up with ideas first before all the other funds. The ones that Warren Buffett follows in. So who invested in Amazon before Warren Buffett invested?
Follow the money.
Follow the smart money, because there's a lot of most money is dumb money. Find out who the smart money is, invest with them, and I'll go wrong some of the time, but if you diversify and do that 20 times, in general, you're going to be good. And I find with angel investing, like investing in private companies, this works almost all the time. Like, the strategy has basically been great for me. And then the other thing I do is I own a business. So,
of course,
so I own two businesses. One is my investments, and the other is my own monetizing my own content, like this podcast and so on.
Intellectual property. And James and I are going to dish more about money and business and investing on my podcast. So make sure when you're done listening to this that you head over to So Money and you hear more about James's thoughts on investing and where to put your money right now. I want to end a little bit talking about politics, if we may. Do you like talking about politics?
I do and I don't.
I hate talking about politics. I like asking the questions. I really don't like having opinions.
Well, I have theories about how things should be run. I don't like talking about personalities because, like think about all the presidents. 100% of all the presidents, 100%, going back to George Washington, they all lied before they became president. They all said they're going to do X, and then they did Y. And they all, I can't even think of who lived up to their promises before they became president. And now you can argue, okay, well, Lincoln was a great president because he stopped slavery, which is great. No one will argue that. But look, the United Kingdom or England stopped slavery 30 years earlier. So why did we even split off from England? We should have just stayed there. And the whole Revolutionary War killed off all these 18-year-old colonialists, and we would have ended slavery in 1833. So I just think the whole institution of government, and I'm not being a libertarian, but I just think the whole thing is a farce. So, but any other political issues I'm happy to talk about.
Did you vote?
I never vote because
you never vote.
Who am I going to vote for? Like,
James, you got to vote.
First off,
it's your civil responsibility, just like jury duty.
First off, I agree with you that we all have a civil responsibility, but I write 300 articles a year. I do 100 podcasts a year. I give tons of talks. I'm able to help people, hundreds of thousands of people, so much more than my one little vote. So if people say, oh, you're a horrible person for not voting, fine. Read all my stuff. You do all the stuff that I write and do for free. Just read it, and you could decide then if I'm a horrible person or not. But not whether I flipped a switch or not for people who are going to lie to me afterwards anyway. Is Trump good or bad? Probably he's crazy. Hillary probably broke the law. Bernie Sanders maybe would have been interesting.
So you're not willing to say one is more destructive than another political candidate. I mean, people say, people who voted for Trump might argue, well, Hillary is a liar and a crook, and
Trump and Hillary both would have been bad, but you have to look at what they represent. Trump represents, Hillary represents a system that has worked for 200 years, which is, whether you like them or not, Washington, D.C., we're like the longest running democracy or republic or whatever, and things are pretty good in America. Wealth has grown, the economy has grown, and so on. And Trump represents, though, if you look at the electoral map, like all the counties between New York City and LA are red. And Trump represents these flyover states where there's actual significant poverty. Will he help that poverty? Absolutely not.
No.
He will definitely not.
So the joke's on them. That's the sad thing, right? Is all the people who voted for him, majority of them are the ones that are going to be ignored in these 4 years.
But Hillary wouldn't have helped them anyway. Barack didn't help them. Mitt Romney wouldn't have helped them. W didn't help them. Bill Clinton didn't help them. I mean, the poverty rate is the same since 1972. Male incomes adjusted for inflation. I said inflammation, but it's almost the same thing. Male incomes are down since 1969. Incomes for college graduates ages 18 to 35, or young people ages 18 to 35, is down every year adjusted for inflation since 1992. So nobody has, and that's Democrat, Republican. Nobody has helped anybody. So we could talk about individual issues that will help people, but Congress doesn't care because they all have their own agendas. The presidents don't care. I don't know about the Supreme Court. The military doesn't care, even though I have a huge respect for anybody who's going to join the military. All of these wars we fight, are they for oil? Are they for, helping people? I have no clue. And I think it has to be acknowledged
What's
that
the silver lining? There has to be some. I mean, because if the way that you're talking right now, if I was to just focus on that, I'd want to end it right now.
Right. So
sounds like, what's the point?
Right. So the silver lining is that the status quo has remained. So in general, we've been a pretty bad country for most of its existence. We had slavery, women couldn't vote. We had, human rights issues, civil rights issues, abortion rights issues, gay rights issues. Really until, gay people couldn't get married until a year ago or 2 years, several years ago. So in general, we've been bad all along, but I think kind of the trend has been status quo, and let's try to do our best, and let's also create these centers of dynamism. Like Silicon Valley has created more innovation than any other city in the world. So I think privately, America has kind of gave a blank check to its citizens to strive to be the best we can be. And we've tried our best in general. Not always, and not everybody, maybe even not most people, but I think the status quo has largely worked, even though I agree with the sentiment of drain the swamp too, because why should Congress raise all this money? Congress basically controls the purse strings. Why should they raise all this money and put tens and tens or hundreds of billions or trillions into fighting these wars where we send these 18-year-old kids? Like, I have a daughter who's 18 and now women can fight in war. I'm never sending my kid to war to shoot other 18-year-olds. Like, even if you believe in a war, I'm hypocritical because I would never send my own 18-year-old daughter to a war.
But you believe in war.
I don't believe in war, although if I were to, I would go in her place. So people say to me, you have to believe in war because of the Civil War, World War II, all these things that are supposedly righteous wars. Fine. If you can convince me a war is righteous, then I'll go. I'm not going to send my 18-year-old. And I hope everybody in Congress goes. Don't just send your children, as someone who just graduated high school, who hasn't even begun life yet. Now we either send them to war or we control them with student loans, which is at $1.6 trillion, the highest ever. And so they can't do anything. They're either going to get their legs shot off, or they're going to shoot people and come back with PTSD, or their hands are going to be tied around their back by student loans.
So this might be my last question, because my husband asked me this yesterday, and I think it's a really interesting question. He likes to ask me hypothetical questions. So I'm going to ask you the same question because I don't even know what my answer would be. But it kind of ties in this whole era that we're in right now and the political turmoil. And without getting too political, would you ever commit a crime to do what you thought was to expose something that you thought was necessary to expose? So, for example, people right now, whether you work at a company, whether you work at the IRS and you have access to Trump's tax returns, or if you know your CEO is a crook, but it will require you committing a crime to expose that he is a crook. You know what I mean?
Like stealing his emails
Like stealing
or
his emails, or breaking into his house. How far would you go for justice?
Well, first off, that's such an interesting question, actually, because, I've run a hedge fund. I've been exposed to everything on Wall Street, where I would say 99% of it is either gray area or criminal. I've seen a lot of politics. I would say, again, maybe 90% is gray area or criminal. I mean, we see it with every campaign we ever look at. One side says the other broke the law, and usually they're both right. And, and then there's exposed tapes or whatever that show both sides were right. And I don't know, unless it was a crime that was really like hurting people, I'm not so sure Hillary having like a storage disk of her emails in her pocket while she walks home, I'm not so sure that's hurting anybody. And also, by the way, Trump talking to a Russian official about the election, whether or not that happened, we don't really know. But I'm not even Democrats like Alan Dershowitz and Geraldo Rivera, of all people, known liberal Democrats, have said that's not really a crime. Like, what's the actual crime that he's going to be prosecuted on? It's not a crime. And it's the same thing for Hillary. What's the actual crime that she did? Where did she hurt people? Same thing with some gray areas on Wall Street, like insider trading. They are officially crimes, but are they victimless? We don't really know. I will tell you, though, I won't commit any crime. My business partner and I, we ran a hedge fund, and we saw all our competitors and peers. They all broke the law. They paid fines. They went to jail. And, we would joke around. We made no money doing it because we were the one fund that we were so straight-laced. Everyone was lying all the time, and we couldn't compete with them. They were saying, "Oh, I went to Bernie Madoff," and I said, "Will you invest money in me?"
You went to Bernie Madoff?
Yeah.
You met Bernie Madoff?
Yeah. I went to Bernie Madoff. He gave me the tour of, the facility.
He didn't show you the 17th floor?
No, I was on the floor above. So he said to me, and we hung out for like an hour or two, and he was great. Like he's such a nice, charismatic guy, actually.
You gotta be to get all that money from everybody.
$60 billion. And I said to him finally, "Hey, I'm running a fund of hedge funds. Will you invest some money with me? Like, you have all this extra money in your fund. You can't."
Oh, wait, how did you first get invited to his office?
One of his traders who was working on the legit side, the market making side, that was the 18th floor. One of my neighbors said, "Why don't you come with me? Bernie wants to meet you," because I was writing for the Financial Times. He read my column, and you can hang out with him. You'll really like him. And my friend said he's like a father figure to me. And so I went and I met him. We spent a lot of time together. We got along really well. And I said, "Can you please? Here's my strategy. Why don't you invest some money with me? It's diversification for you, for your massive hedge fund." And he said, "James, you're great. It seems like you'd fit into the culture here really well." I'm not sure now in retrospect what that means. He said, you can have a job here anytime you want, but I can't invest money with you because I don't know where you're investing. And you could be investing anywhere, and there's no way for me to track that. And the last thing I need is to see the name Bernard Madoff Securities LLC on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. And with that, and I was depressed. I left his office.
It was the last thing he ever saw, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. I was depressed. I was leaving his office, walking down the steps of it's called the Lipstick Building on 53rd and Lexington, and I was depressed, and I was making some phone calls to other hedge fund managers, like, "Oh, how can I compete? He's returning like 15% a year. I can't ever compete with that. I'm going to get out of the hedge fund business." And I actually started the process of shutting my fund down because of how am I going to compete with Bernie Madoff?
Bernie Madoff.
And they
for your pivot.
All these hedge funds I was calling were like, "Hey, can you get us in? We want to invest in his fund. Can you get us in?" And I'm like, "Nah, I'm never going to see him. I don't think I can get you in." They all deny having those phone conversations with me now. They all say, "Oh, we knew he was a fraud all along." But that's just it. Nobody knows anything. If I leave you with anything, make sure you're hanging out with the smartest people in the room and do your own work, but own things, but trust the people smarter than you, because most people don't know anything.
Ask the questions, offer up the ideas.
And build your life. So more percentage of your decisions per day are choices you want to make rather than choices you have to make.
Yeah. Yeah, who wants to decide on a couch?
Yeah, or like...
I hate deciding what to have for dinner. That's my That's my pet peeve.
Yeah,
right now.
or even like when you're pitching a TV show to CNBC, or any network, that's very difficult, right? Like that was a long process for you.
I won't take credit for that. I didn't pitch the idea. TV is such a tough market, I think. People expect drama. They expect people throwing, like, prime time especially, there's an expectation that there's going to be intensity, high stakes, drama. That's why people come back to a TV show sometimes late at night, and this aired at 10 o'clock at night.
So how would you kind of create
So that was
drama?
hard. Sometimes it didn't happen, because the profile was not that kind of person,
Why don't you do something crazy like throw up all over John
Trust me, I thought about that sometimes.
you
Like,
know.
how can I plant like mini bombs around here? And
Or like, were you pregnant then?
no.
Because I was thinking maybe you could like break, your water could break.
Yeah.
Like right in the middle of the interview. That would be like a lot of drama.
The best episode, I think, was with Leor Cohen, who was the co-founder of Def Jam.
Yeah, music guy.
Music mogul. Such an interesting guy. I mean, like, I could have spent a year with him. He's so fascinating. Such a charming man. No wonder he's so successful. But he had a pretty volatile personality. And, one of his big responsibilities is making sure that his talent, his stars, his musicians get groomed and they understand the business, and he's very much a mentor to them. And sometimes these guys, they're like these young kids off the block. They're very talented, but they don't have discipline. They don't show up for things. So he would get really pissed off. And there was one moment where we caught him. He asked me to leave the room, actually, because he wanted to really give his client some
Did you get that on tape? Him
so
asking
we
you to leave the room?
we kept rolling, and that was an awesome moment because I feel like he was extremely raw and real with his client. And
Do you think the most successful people, like I'm very non-confrontational, like I really hate confrontation. Do you think the most successful people in the world are just indulge in confrontation, like they love it?
Oh, that's a good question.
And then the flip side of that is, as you get success, there are people kind of above you on the ladder of success and people below you. Do you think it's all about grooming and mentoring the people below you? So that is kind of this army that helps you move up?
I will use John Paul DeJoria as an example. He was one of the few billionaires that we profiled in this series.
I didn't know he was a billionaire.
Yeah, he's
So
worth
he's like
$2 billion.
A
He
hair
owns
salon guy.
and Patron Tequila.
Okay.
People don't know that. And it's two very disparate companies. He's at the helm of each of them, and each are worth $1 billion each. So he's a very fascinating man. They don't make him like John Paul DeJoria anymore. And I will say that to answer your question, he is not super confrontational, but you never want to cross him. What
does that mean?
It means that when he is angry and when he is upset, you will feel his wrath, and it's not pretty.
Like why is it not pretty?
So,
What does
for
it look like?
example, there was an episode. I don't even know if this aired, but basically, he was promoting a new company that he's launching, and Forbes ran an article about it that had some misstatements that was factually incorrect in some places. He blew up. Like he called the reporter and emailed the reporter, not called her, but emailed the reporter directly, and that's scary. Like when, a billionaire is like sending you an email, like, saying like this article, because usually you go through your people, he goes right to the source and he's going to make sure. And he didn't like throw chairs or anything, but it got pretty tense. He was like slamming his fist on the table. And you don't want to piss off someone like John Paul DeJoria because he's very powerful. And I think that he really expects a certain level of hard work and perfection from the people that work for him and are around him. And they want to please him, and they know that he's ultimately a guy that will look out for them, but you don't want to be in a room with him when he's giving you bad news because it's just going to make you feel really bad.
So a couple questions there, but also, so you're saying the people around him want to please him, but are they also their own people? Like they must be great to be sitting on top of operations for $1 billion companies.
Yeah, they're very grateful. It's hard. When I was filming, it was kind of hard to get a real sense of who these people were because they knew the cameras were around. But I think that when I did confront one of his second in command at Paul Mitchell, I said to him, you're very accommodating right now in this meeting, and you're very whatever you say, Mr. DeJoria, but when you have bad news, when you didn't hit sales, when you have to fire someone, when you forgot to do something, do you tell him? And how do you tell him? He's like, yeah, I tell him, and it's hard. And I try to keep those meetings fewer and far in between. But, it's my job. And I think he ultimately, if someone is a good leader, they will respect that, that you came to them and admitted fault and and it doesn't happen very often. It happens. We're human. But I think that that's why he likes a second in command a lot, because he knows that he will always have his back and he'll always be honest.
And so do you see him mentoring his bench, the people below?
Yeah. His daughter is actually, he's very close to his family and his kids. One of his daughters is actually, I think, getting groomed to sort of take over the company eventually. And she's got a very high position there. I don't know how much time he has to mentor. He's all over the place. He's flying here. He's going to this event. He's doing this.
I always kind of see him I see him in the street. I see him at events. Like I always see him around.
He's a busy guy. And so I don't know. I mean, I think that, what's funny about him is he doesn't have a computer. He has a flip phone. He doesn't have a cell phone. But it's, TV is, you're in this now, and I wanted to bring this up. You're in the midst of looking at some TV projects and pursuing them. And it's tough because it could take years. It could take 2 seconds, depending on how quickly the network wants to move and the sponsors.
So let's look at both of those extremes. I think if it's going to take years, do it yourself and then show what you have, put it on YouTube, invest $100 in creating some ratty set and do your own thing and get some people to help you.
Have the social proof. Right.
Yeah, and then pitch it. If it's going to take 2 seconds, then okay, you've made an easy choice and that's good.
That's true.
If it's not easy, then figure out some backdoor way to do it that's fun for you rather than just catering to jumping through the hurdles that somebody else sets for you.
Amen to that. James, was this fun for you?
Farnoosh, this was so great. Can you come on again? Let's do this regularly.
Let's do this regularly because I'm sure as your life evolves, as you're doing new things, I want to maybe do this if we could bring in some of your fun things that you're doing, like some audio of your stand-up, some of your ping pong match. I know it's a podcast, but I feel like this stuff is just too good to not be to track and bring to your audience.
Yeah, or I'm thinking of doing more daily. You should come on and we'll just talk issues and stuff daily. We'll just
we'll just go through the news. What papers do you read? Do you read any?
I don't read any newspaper.
I mean, not papers, but
I don't read anything written in the last unless they're a podcast guest. I don't read
Twitter?
anything. No, I don't read any.
No Twitter?
I don't use my Twitter feed. I don't use my Facebook feed. I don't use my Instagram feed unless I'm just distributing my own material. Like an article I wrote. News is just the rough draft of history. So I'd rather read something 10 year, written 50 years ago or 20 years ago. I want to read quality writing to inspire my writing, or I want to read quality stuff that's been analyzed for a really long time and we see the results, rather than if I just read
Yeah, but news is context to stay informed and have an informed opinion.
About what?
About
what did you read today in the news that gives you an informed opinion that changes your mind about something?
Climate change. My husband and I are thinking maybe we don't live in New York City. If this Paris treaty doesn't go through, then
because is New York suddenly going to get more polluted? Like the
no, but the sea levels are rising, James. I live in Brooklyn, and it's getting scary.
Right, so I wouldn't. I already know I'm not going to own in New York because maybe there's
You're ahead of us.
maybe there's a 5% chance New York City goes underwater. I don't know. I don't believe I believe there is some change happening in the climate, whether it's you could just see every year is a little different since I was a kid, but. Okay, let's say there's a 5% chance New York goes underwater. Don't buy a house in New York. The decision made.
Well,
I don't need to read some new New York
Post
headline. That's the dots
that I'm connecting with news.
There won't be suddenly a headline in the New York Post, New York City goes underwater tomorrow. Get out. That's going to happen over a long time.
Although, do you know the most read article in the New Yorker last year was this 50-page article about, online pages, was about climate change in the Pacific Northwest. And how those towns in Seattle, near Seattle, Washington, Portland are making adjustments now because they really feel like they're gonna that part of the country they think is going to be underwater or will break off, or there'll be some tsunami. I think that's going to basically
So the writer of that actually used to be a tenant of mine,
of course,
on a property that I owned 15 years ago. I think won the Pulitzer Prize, that article.
Yeah,
and I have not read it. I would rather read, like Bill Gates has recommended a bunch of books about climate change. Those are the books I'll read, where it's like, okay, somebody who's a scientist who really studies all this stuff, who makes predictions. By the way, there's other issues. Isn't Yellowstone National Park one big volcano that's 10,000 years late on exploding on their average cycle? So there's nature problems all over the place. I honestly hope I live near a volcano and I die instantly when the worst happens. So I should move there and get out of New York, where you're worried about owning a place where a millimeter a year the water's going to rise up. Okay, when it's gone up maybe 10 more millimeters, then you should move. But okay. There's no problem tomorrow.
I'll just text you from now on about what my next move should be.
All right. Well, we could talk about, I'll be happy to read the paper with you if we do a regular podcast.
I would love to. We'll do a handshake on it.
Yeah.
We're shaking hands, everybody.
We'll do, for someone who you read the newspaper, I don't, we'll spread out a bunch of newspapers and it's like James and Farnoosh read the news. It'll be like a half-hour podcast. We'll do it within a sub-podcast of this one. And
can we do it while driving cars? Like, we need a gimmick, right? We need to be in a coffee shop. Like Seinfeld drives the fancy cars at first, and then they go to a coffee shop.
We could do that. Like James and Farnoosh read the news.
We could do live Facebook.
James and Farnoosh read the news while eating donuts, and we'll
no,
we'll
we
do
can't
that.
eat donuts. We're gonna die, in a year if we just eat donuts. We have to keep it healthy.
All right.
How about bulletproof coffee?
James and Farnoosh bulletproof their way
Sponsored
through
by
the news
Bulletproof
today.
Coffee.
Yeah, I'll call it. We'll get sponsored
Let's
by
get
Bulletproof
Dave.
Coffee. On it. I'm on it.
We are just movers and shakers.
And it'll be back in action. We've been doing videos since 2006.
And we'll cold call people.
We've been in the trenches together since 2006. I'd be happy to do another show with you.
Oh, that would be so much fun. I've just been, my cheeks hurt from all the smiling and laughing I've done. And P.S., James and I are doing another round of Q&A on my podcast, So Money. So join us there as well.
More finance oriented. I can't wait.
Finance, business, money, all that fun stuff. Thank you so much, James.
Thank you, Farnoosh. So exciting.
For more from James, check out The James Altucher Show on the Choose Yourself Network at jamesaltucher.com and get yourself on the free insiders list today.
Hey, thanks for listening. Listen, I have a big favor to ask you, and it will only take 30 seconds or less, and it would mean a huge amount to me. If you like this podcast, please let me know. Please let the team I work with know. Please let my guests know. And you can do this easily by subscribing to the podcast. It's probably the biggest favor you could do for me right now, and it's really simple. Just go to iTunes, search for The James Altucher Show, and click subscribe. Again, it will only take you 30 seconds or less, and if you subscribe now, it will really help me out a lot. Thanks again.
AI might be the most important new computer technology ever. It's storming every industry, and literally billions of dollars are being invested. So buckle up. The problem is that AI needs a lot of speed and processing power, so how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? It's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. OCI has 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, offers one consistent price instead of variable regional pricing, and of course, nobody does data better than Oracle. So now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and less than half the cost of other clouds. If you want to do more and spend less, like Uber, 8x8, and Databricks Mosaic, take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/advance. That's oracle.com/advance. oracle.com/advance.